Hello and welcome to the EklipX podcast, the Commodity Playbook. This is a channel for the entire commodity trading industry, including the next generation looking to break into the space. From the trading floor to entrepreneurs, we interview market experts, innovators, and traders to better navigate the latest industry trends. Our mandate is clear. We aim to provide greater access and better transparency in an opaque and cyclical market. In this fourth episode, which will be a bit different from our previous episodes, we will focus on the guest's personal journey, as well as innovation and the future of the commodities market. And for this discussion, we are joined by Arthur Richier, Head of Strategy at Vortexa. Welcome to the show, Arthur.
Thank you for having me, Max.
Now, Vortexa is a software company that generates, collects, and analyzes global data on seaborne oil and gas cargo movements. So, to start things off, I want to talk about your personal journey and how you started off your career in the commodity space.
So I didn't know what I wanted to do. Sort of a classic, went to business school and did a very general degree. Now, I feel like for 4 years, all I had was intro to accounting, intro to management, intro to HR. We're still looking at things like Taylorism and Fordism. So needless to say, I left without a clue of what I wanted to do.
Like most people.
Yeah, exactly. I went down the consulting route. I had done an exchange in Singapore, so I was lucky enough to get an internship out there and started working for Big Four. It's a very large organization, 300,000 employees. And I guess that's why I got lucky, because in Singapore, the main team sort of focused on shipping and commodities, financials, or manufacturing. I was raised mainly by the ocean in Brittany. I always had a love for boats, for sailing, and just sort of put my head out there to join the shipping team. And then that's how I got started.
So you started in a more corporate environment and then...
Absolutely. Suit and tie every day, long hours, lots of hierarchy within the organization. So couldn't get more corporate than that.
And you were drawn to the commodities sector, not just because of your love of the sea, but also, I take it, because of the opportunities at the company at Vortexa, right? It was a startup, interesting environment, change from the corporate.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an industry that's physical. I think I really enjoyed that. I love the dry bulk side, the energy side, big mountains of commodities. It was all very fascinating.
And how did you get involved in Vortexa? Did you sort of just fall into it by chance, or were you referred by a friend? Or?
It's funny when you look back on things, how everything just seems to sort of fit well together. But in my first consulting role, I was part of a pioneering team and this consultancy that looked at data analytics. Now, it was very much, nice Tableau visualizations. There was barely any tech behind it. There's an episode in my life, which not many people know, where I actually left the consultancy and joined a startup in Paris, in France. Great idea. They did smart water meters in Africa. And allowed people to top up using their mobile phones, which prevented a lot of the bad debts and the sort of large outflows of cash for communities in Africa that normally needed that to access their utilities. So very sound idea, did a lot of good in the region. But that being said, I'll be honest, I hated my first startup experience. I think it was too much of a change. It went from putting on my tie every morning to working out of a beanbag with a hoodie. If you weren't a vegan, there was a 4 p.m. yoga break. I mean, it's all the startup cliches that existed at the time. So left the startup world, went back to school, did a master's in energy and trading with a shipping component, and then actually went for another large organization, S&P Global. Now, what I really enjoyed there was that I was within the pricing team, specifically for the shipping industry. And so it was very much a startup vibe within a large organization. And that sort of connected shipping and commodities, data analytics, pricing, the freight industry. And so when Vortexa, came along and a recruiter reached out actually, saying, hey, we've got this analyst role. You need to know a bit about data and you need to know a bit about freight and about prices and commodities. Do you want to come along? And it was the perfect environment, really, because it had very much all the benefits of the startup world, where you worked hard, but you had a lot of fun doing it, whilst working within a very serious industry and trying to solve serious problems for our clients. So brought together the best of both worlds. I've been there for 5 years now. Yeah, haven't really thought about getting another job or moving elsewhere for now. So really enjoying it.
Did you find it easier to compartmentalize your workflow at a corporate? Because I know at startups it can be sort of 24/7, head against the grindstone.
You definitely wear many hats. Especially at Vortexa, we look for high talent density, where you're not going to be hired simply for the role description. You're going to have to go above and beyond. I think like a lot of, roles today, especially in commodities and trading, where there's a lot of value, that's on the water. I mean, the entire seaborne industry when it comes to oil and gas is worth $3 trillion. So, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to go above and beyond. And you need to have that entrepreneurial spirit, whether you're working in operations and trading and analysis. That being said, again, I think it was really good to have gone through S&P Global Platts. It was a really good foundation for work in the commodity industry, because similarly, you needed to be entrepreneurial when it came to connecting with the markets, with understanding the markets, and then putting out your price assessments at the end of the day.
And what, other than the lack of vegans or corporates, what were the main differences between your corporate background and the startup environment you now find yourself in?
There was definitely more of you understood that the job was a 9 to 5, 9 to 6. The barriers definitely felt stronger there. But maybe there wasn't that closeness as well with your colleagues, because at a startup, especially at the beginning, you definitely feel like you're a bit more in the trenches together. It's fascinating now to realize that we're probably going to cross 200 employees at Vortexa by the end of the year. I think when I joined, there was maybe 20, 30 of us. It was definitely a very different environment from that sense. You're closer to your colleagues. You tend to work longer hours. But it feels more rewarding as well, especially a company like Vortexa, we're all shareholders of the business. So it helps align the incentives of working hard and knowing that what we put into the company will also get out as well.
And what are the main challenges to working at a startup? Because obviously we've spoke about the workflows and how you incentivize, which is a great opportunity, but there must be a number of challenges that you could maybe tell our audience about.
I think having to build a brand from scratch, it's very difficult. There's a lot of companies out there doing some great things, especially in the commodities and shipping industry. It's probably the oldest industry in the world. So you have some very big established names. So I think that was definitely a massive change. S&P Global, whether it's for their work, with market intelligence, or Platts, now known as Commodity Insights, everyone knows the name in the commodity industry. At Vortexa, we really had to build that. Today we're invited at the Financial Times Commodity Summit. It wasn't the case, 10 years ago. So I think building the brand, from the ground up was definitely challenging. But at the same time, then you can measure the journey that you've gone through. So we were talking earlier, ahead of this podcast, there's a large industry event next week called International Energy Week. I think the first time we hosted an event there was maybe 50 attendees. Now, as I'm speaking to, there's more than 700 registrations. So it's incredible to see that growth as well.
And a little bit about Vortexa now, because you said 10 years, coming up to 10 years. And I want to know about the mission statement there, really. And what does your product offering look like at the moment? And how is it evolving?
So at Vortexa, the mission statement is to inform, connect, and optimize energy markets. Now, we identified the fact that there is a massive information gap within the industry. So Vortexa's initial mission was to come in and help solve that. Now, in practical terms, when a cargo of commodities is loaded, in a port, sails to another port across the globe, you and I don't necessarily see it, from the bustling streets of London. That being said, there's a lot more satellites in the air now. And this was sort of the foundation of Vortexa. The cost of purchasing data generated by satellites that allow you to track vessels has gone down tremendously in the last 10 to 15 years. So we're able to harness that data, track those vessels. We then partner with customs, port agents, traders, brokers, in order to identify the cargo on board. And then we use large language models to fill in the gaps where we don't necessarily have that third-party information. So when you sort of aggregate all that together, we then provide that information to traders, to ship owners, to governments, to brokers, to traders, to give them this real-time, access to information. Now it really takes one click to see that, okay, there's going to be 20,000 tons of diesel, coming out of this little refinery in Brittany in France, maybe heading to another country. You see all that in real time. Previously, you needed to wait for, independent organizations to put together customs data. I mean, sometimes you'd have to wait 3 months after the fact to get all this information. Now it's at people's fingertips in real time. So it's been a revolution there in itself to bring that data to people and allow them to trade then in a more efficient way. There's a paradox in commodities, and I think in shipping especially, where though it remains the most efficient form of transportation, at the same time it thrives on all the inefficiencies in the market. And by providing more information, we help sort of level the playing field and hopefully make the market more efficient. In turn, that can help with the sustainability of commodity markets and help advance a lot of things.
I can imagine when the idea of Vortexa was conceived, a lot of the tech wasn't necessarily around then, 10 years ago. So how did the genesis come about?
So our founder, Fabio Kuhn, used to work for BP. He was head of trading and technology out there. And so he was very much close to the action in terms of what technology was available to large trading organizations. And he saw what it could be, basically. And so, branched out on his own. There was definitely a lot of building to do. We've hired some extremely smart engineers, some that used to work, for large health organizations, mapping neural networks in the brain, and applying that technology and that vision to commodity markets, to seaborne energy, to shipping. So it's taken a lot of time to, sort of build all that and get to the stage where we're at today. Some of the large language models we use and have built, are not unlike what today powers things like ChatGPT or other models like that. So I think it's less a case of everything was available 9 years ago when Vortexa came about. We've definitely built the company alongside the technological advances, both from an internal sort of computing point of view, but also from an external, software and satellite point of view. It's fascinating to think that I think now there's a rocket launch every 3 days. And then these rockets in turn put satellites in space. And organizations like SpaceX, but also organizations like Rocket Lab in New Zealand, they've really democratized the ability to put satellites in space and to gather that data to help us track vessels, but also, the technology is used to identify where wildfires are started in real time. You've got very powerful imagery capabilities as well. So, I think where we've done well is to harness all of that, to turn it into a product that allows actionable decisions for the trading and commodity industry. But we definitely haven't done it alone. And it's been all those technological advances as well that have really helped.
Yeah, about that. How do you differentiate yourself from your competitors? What's your USP?
I think investing in the technology early, we always saw the potential there, because you can easily have a company when it comes to gathering external data in the market, and some of our competitors do that. Their main value add is gathering all that data, because it takes a lot of time, and because traders don't have that time, they don't necessarily have the time to build those connections as well. What we've done is gone one level above, where not only do we collect data, but we supplement it with technology to fill in the gaps. So we look at, the historical trading of those vessels. We look at where different types of cargoes originate, where they've gone in the past. We've got a very powerful destination model that can predict where these vessels are likely to be headed. So I think that layer of technology is really what differentiates us. And it's not something that you can sort of add later down the road. We've been around for 9 years. We've invested more than $60 million from our investors and our own money into this product. So there's quite a moat as well, and quite a barrier to entry in order to catch up after.
So talking about cargo ships, knowing where they're heading, what about shadow fleets? How do you track vessels that don't have GPS?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting use case. So the GPS on vessels is known as the AIS. And what they do is they turn it off. So they stop emitting that signal, which ultimately is a safety at sea protocol. It helps avoid collision, it helps plan accordingly where vessels are headed. And they do that to obscure their movements, most likely because they're involved in trading cargoes under sanctioned regimes. So we can think of Iran, we can think of Venezuela. Lately, we can think of Russian cargoes that are maybe above the price cap, or that use Western shipping services. So there's a few ways to track them. One is we track vessels that are engaged in ship-to-ship operations with those vessels. So we can see when a vessel is loading or discharging in the middle of the ocean. And if one vessel does that sort of seemingly out of the blue, we can assume that there's a vessel next to it. You can then supplement AIS technology with other forms of satellite data. So a popular one is SAR, synthetic aperture radar. Now that allows you to build a 2 to 3 dimensional object and to visualize it using infrared technology. You can use, of course, optical and imagery, but you need to make sure that it's not cloudy that day, that there isn't anything obscuring the vessel. And also RF technology using radio frequencies. So if someone on board is using a talkie-walkie or their phone or anything like that, you're able to catch that. So you have those different layers that you can sort of overlay on top in order to capture those vessels. And then there's tracking the cargo itself. So you can potentially see the cargo when it's discharging in a port in the final destination and sort of work your way back. We had a neat little trick maybe 6-7 years ago where we had elements of cargoes where there was an unknown origin. And it was very interesting because when we selected those cargoes of unknown origin, we ended up with a like for like of what were the estimates at the time of those sanctioned flows. But now today we're able to track accurately whether it comes from Iran, Venezuela, or in some cases Russia as well.
That's interesting. So despite the jurisdiction, you can still track. So I would have thought with Iran and Russia, it's quite hard to monitor those flows.
It's difficult. They don't represent a majority amount of the flows on the water, but it definitely represents a majority of the questions that we get from our clients and partners in order to track those.
How are you transforming the commodities industry at the moment?
I think by providing that transparency, it leads to conversations between traders and, counterparts that probably wouldn't have happened before. Once more, there's so many people involved along the supply chain of when you trade a cargo. You have the trader, you have the broker. It could be the cargo broker, it could be the ship broker. You have the ship owner, you've got your operations team, you've got your compliance team. I think by allowing them to see that same view of the world, which is independent and data-driven, we're allowing for an industry where there's faster decision-making, more accurate decision-making, and hopefully more efficient decision-making as well.
Can you highlight a couple of your standout achievements?
So as we're speaking, I think maybe an hour or so, there's a press release coming out where we're releasing our new Anywhere freight pricing product. So we used to focus on our energy flows analytics and our freight analytics, as well as our inventories analytics for onshore. And now we're moving into a totally new vertical, which is Anywhere freight pricing. Now that allows unlimited, instant, and anywhere prices for the transportation of refined petroleum products. So now one of our users can select 2 ports, can select a vessel size, and will automatically be shown a price in dollars per ton. Now, we're doing this across 50,000 routes that have traded in the past, but it's potentially applicable to 70 million routes. If anyone would like to potentially see if an arb is open on a route that hasn't necessarily traded before. So, I think that is really a game changer in the industry. And it's only been possible because we've laid those foundations across tracking cargoes, tracking the vessels that transport those cargoes, having an accurate destination model, and then harnessing the data that we get from all our partners, whether brokers or others. In an instant, a trader now can look at 3 different route options, calculate an accurate CIF price in an instant, really, without having to pick up the phone and go through this lengthy discovery process, which involves multiple people. And everyone along that chain of sort of personas I described before, the broker now can focus on finding the suitable ship and going down to the vessel level, because he'll have an idea already of which routes will be most profitable for his principals. The ship owner as well can look at which routes are likely to generate the most revenue for his vessels, hopefully being more efficient as well in the process. So very excited to release that today, and I think it's going to have a huge impact.
And from research to rollout, how long did that take?
It took us about 18 months. Like everything else, it started from a conversation with our clients. They identified a pain point. They mentioned the possibility of, if this were to exist, it would be really useful. And then we got around to building it.
You mentioned your use of data earlier. Could you go into a bit more detail about that and how you're integrating big data models?
So I think today we use close to 30 different models across our technology stack. Now, I'm no expert in this, and a lot of them will use different techniques, let's call them, whether regression analysis or, again, large language models are what we use for most of them. And it's really about harnessing the incredible amount of data that we have. I think last time, I checked, we had processed 400 billion data points since we started at Vortexa. I think we're processing close to 20 million data points a day. So it's just how do you harness that incredible amount of data, adding a layer of industry expertise, and then obviously getting the feedback from our clients in order to tailor it to how they need to see the world for their workflow.
Now, given the heightened geopolitical and economic instabilities at the moment and that impact on trade flows, particularly in the energy market, like rising tariffs and increasing shipping rates, how do you strategize around such uncertainties?
It's a good question. Maybe the answer is that we don't strategize around those uncertainties. And maybe the answer is that at the end of the day, I think commodity trading and the shipping industry, have always reacted in a logical way to external forces, to external factors. And I think our job then is simply to listen to our clients, to listen to their needs. We put the data forward. We always put forward the fact, that our data is independent and is generated by data. So it's independent, data-driven products at the end of the day that we provide. And so they will react to calm markets, to very volatile markets in more or less the same way, where we'll just take in the data that it's getting and generating that output. So maybe the reality is, we just continue doing what we do, listen to our clients, see what the data says, and take it from there.
And what's the sort of main feedback you get from clients, and how do you deal with tricky customers?
I think like every industry, it's about separating, what people tell us. It's about trying to replicate their pain points. It's about looking at what we hear the most. So, if it's something that we hear 20 times in one day, we'll focus on it maybe more than if we just hear something once in a blue moon. So it's very much similar to, any industry organization out there, I'd say.
I want to move on now to talk about the future of the commodities industry, and obviously Vortexa are integral to that in terms of your mission statement and product offering. How do you see the future of the commodities market playing out?
I think, like I said earlier in this podcast, the commodities industry is probably the oldest industry in the world. I think if we go back to what we talked about just now about technology, I think that's going to have a huge impact. I think it will make markets more efficient. It's definitely going to be harnessed and is already being harnessed by commodity traders, by large multinationals, by governments as well. So I think a commodity market that's driven by data and technology is really what we're going to see. And I think that's going to underpin the major changes coming up in this industry.
And there's still a lot of old processes, though, in commodities, right? It's not completely futuristic quite yet.
No, absolutely. Sometimes change takes time. What can I say? So, for example, when it comes to customs data, I don't know if you're familiar with bills of ladings.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So Trafigura just did an electronic bills of lading deal, which was very interesting.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to look into that. But there's a country we work with where we obtain digitized bills of lading for imports. And it's fantastic because, we're plugged into an API, we get the data daily, and it runs very smoothly. You'll be shocked to know that on the export side, the bills of ladings are not digitized, they're still paper-based. So this means scanning them, literally with a printer. It means collecting then the scanned versions. It means inputting that data into an Excel. It means then collating that Excel into an API. I mean, already, the amount of steps I've just listed and described, it takes 100 times the time, if not more, than getting it through an API. So, it's not a level playing field in that sense. Some countries are way ahead of others. Some countries are a bit more opaque as well, and maybe don't have the same regulatory frameworks or requirements when it comes to the commodity industry. So you're right. There's a lot as well that can still be done with existing technology even before we talk about the future.
Where do you see Vortexa 5 years from now?
Much larger, much more integrated, more present in more geographies. So we raised a Series C last year with Morgan Stanley as the lead investor during that round. And we've since expanded. We've opened up an office in Geneva as well as an office in the UAE. So, hopefully we'll continue expanding geographically. There's already tremendous opportunities in those regions, as well as the regions where we already are based. The Americas, Europe, APAC as well. We have an APAC headquarter in Singapore, but you can think of China, you can think of Africa, you can think of Latin America. There's still a lot more potential out there. And then, I mentioned earlier that we've just moved into a new vertical in pricing. That's purely looking at the transportation of refined products. We're going to look at the transportation of what's known as dirty petroleum products as well. There's also LNG, LPG, doubling down on the energy space. You also have chemicals, biofuels as well. So a lot of potential to continue expanding horizontally, but vertically as well.
You mentioned earlier your use of LLMs and AI. How does that fit into the future picture? Do you think you're going to be using more of it?
I think like we've done so far, we're going to keep abreast of technological developments.
And how have you used it so far? Sorry to interrupt, but...
So when I was talking about the evolution of a satellite data industry, the number of suppliers there, how I was talking about the evolution of large language models, being able to extract data out of large data sets. I think we're going to continue doing what we're doing. A lot of our engineers, get together regularly. We had a hackathon a couple months ago where, it's about putting the day job aside and really putting your head down and focusing on a very cool idea, a really cool project, see how quickly we can execute. Weekly, we also have a meeting where an engineer will put forward a white paper or something that he's heard, maybe something that was released by a university, and we'll discuss internally, can that apply to some of our products? Can we use it to improve our existing products? We've had some of our clients, ask maybe if in the future there could be a support chatbot. So, lots of interesting things there that I think we'll continue to look at.
So that would work on a sort of closed data set if it was a chatbot fed on your data?
Absolutely, allowing our users to basically get answers to their questions without having that need for maybe human interaction and sending an email, waiting for an email to come back. So in the limits of the possible, pushing those boundaries, I think that'd be really cool.
And do you believe the hype around AI, do you think it's the magic bullet the commodities industry needs?
I think it's definitely something to be harnessed. I don't think it's as simple as, let's just put ChatGPT inside every single trading company and we're going to see greater returns. We're going to see a more efficient industry. If we go back to what we were saying about documentation and, blockchain has been around for a while. It's yet to be used across the entire industry. That we are seeing example, we're seeing successful proof of concepts. So I think similarly with AI, there's obviously a lot of companies harnessing the technology out there. I think it's going to take some time. I think maybe we don't even know what are the best use cases today for this technology. We like to look at it as augmented intelligence rather than, artificial intelligence.
What's the difference there?
I think if you take artificial intelligence, in its pure definition, we're talking about a sentient intelligence. I think now we're not there yet. I think we're at the stage where it's more about augmented intelligence, which is large language models which are able to harness all the data out there and just have a much quicker and accurate output than we've seen in the past. And then that can be applied to any problems or questions or challenges, faced by commodity trading teams, their operators, ship owners and the likes. So we're going to keep ahead of those developments, continue harnessing it where it makes sense within our products and continue pushing those boundaries as well when it comes to those use cases with our clients.
You mentioned sentient beings there. I'm not trying to get too futuristic, but AGI is a big, Gen AI is a big point of discussion at the moment. Do you think that's really got the legs to change the game? I mean, blockchain you mentioned before, and that's a great online filing system, but it hasn't been rolled out across the commodity space, and there's still piles of loan documentation there. So do you think AGI has got real potential?
For sure. It absolutely has real potential. But I think we're going to have to all come together as technology providers, as traders, and as regulators as well to use its potential in the right way.
And I know you're moving to Dubai. Is that a personal decision, or is that because the industry is moving out there?
A bit of both. If we start with the industry, the UAE is a fascinating place. I think it has a lot of advantages as well. The first one is geographic. You hear often it's all about location, location, location. And they're ideally situated between the West and the East. You're able to trade Asian, European, American markets, all within the same day. So I think that's really, really impressive. At the same time, the regulatory environment, they've created very business-friendly environments. If you look at ADGM in Abu Dhabi or the DMCC in Dubai, which has attracted a lot of companies, rightly so. At the same time, the emergence of the national oil companies, which have really transformed in the last couple of years. If you look at ADNOC, for example, they've heavily invested in their trading capabilities. And it used to be the case that NOCs used to partner, though you still have some of these international joint ventures. So ADNOC has partnered with Total and OMV. At the same time, a lot of the NOCs in the region are trying to build out their own trading capabilities. So that means a lot of the traders are moving to the region. When the trading community moves somewhere, that's then followed by the broking community, by the ship owners. I think there's still a lot of potential as well for more adjacent industries to go out there, such as recruiting, finance, legal as well. There's probably not that much commodity financing and credit facilities in the region for commodity markets yet, but I think that's the next step. So, all these reasons above means that for the industry, I think it's really the place to be for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, you mentioned the financing of commodities there. It's interesting seeing a lot of alternatives and non-bank lenders moving into the space now. Family-owned funds and commercial banks were retreating a few years ago. It looks like they're coming back in. So it's a hub of finance as well, right?
Absolutely.
And on a personal note, you think it would be, there's less crime, there's great facilities.
I think I'm going to get more vitamin D out there than in London, so that'll be good. I recently visited Abu Dhabi, and being French, it felt very French being out there. Now, I can imagine a lot of Total traders maybe moved out there or went to work for ADNOC, but there was a Carrefour at every street corner, which is kind of a Waitrose equivalent. Yeah. There's now another outpost of the Louvre, so culture is also developing there. So it felt very comfortable.
It's a Western outpost already.
Exactly.
In the middle of the desert.
Yeah. No, it felt very comfortable out there. So I think on a personal level, it's going to be extremely rewarding as well.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with everything at Vortexa, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Max.